Hey, it's 2 o'clock according to my watch. Are y'all ready to go ahead and get started? I just want to say a quick welcome to everybody who is here today. I am Dr. Allison Boyer, Director of the Center for Teaching and Learning, and I'm privileged to be collaborating with ICOLN Virtual Campus today and bring you a fantastic presentation from three fantastic ICOLN professors. So I'm going to pass the reins over to them to do some introductions and to get us started today. So ladies, it's all yours.
Okay, I guess I'll go first. My name's first on the slide. I'm Dianne Stroman. I teach environmental science for ICOLN, and I also have taught on the Frisco campus for several years.
I guess my name is next on the slides. I'm Meena Beri, and I'm ICOLN faculty for economics, and I also taught at Frisco campus before joining ICOLN.
And I am Whitney Pisani. I teach speech communications. I'm our only ICOLN faculty member right now, but I was at the Plano campus for about 10 years before transferring to ICOLN.
Okay, I guess we should be getting started. So here are our slides. I hope everybody can see the slides. Okay, so we have seen that students often outsmart us when it comes to cheating, right? But what matters most is our persistent efforts as faculty to maintain academic integrity. Well, to be very honest, we may fail at times, and it happens that even after making efforts, students find a way to cheat. But you know what? At least we tried. That's the satisfaction we have. And as Rudyard Kipling says, we have 40 million reasons for failure, but not a single excuse. So that's what the intention behind it, that at least we are making efforts to maintain academic integrity.
Okay, this is me. So I'm going to start out talking a little bit about the different ways that students cheat online, and some of the more common cheating websites I have listed here, including Quizlet, Course Hero, Chegg, Mathway, and Photomath, and some of the things that we do to combat that. And so there's a lot of different ways. One of them is we do have a proctored exam service called HonorLock. If you have never used it, it works pretty well. It's imperfect like all of our tools, but if you saw us talk in January, I told this story, but the semester that we all first went into lockdown for COVID, so spring 2020, I had an online class that had exams, and they had the option of either being proctored or they could go to the testing center. And then when we shut down and the testing center was no longer an option, I had to actually take away the HonorLock option because I had not required students to have all the computer capabilities required for HonorLock. So in my pre-lockdown exam, my last exam before lockdown, I had an exam average in the 70s, which is pretty common for my exams. So right in the mid 70s. In the very next exam, post-lockdown, when I no longer had a proctoring service available for my exams, my exam average was in the 90s. And I had one student that somehow finished my 50 question exam in 5 minutes and aced it. And I still, to this day, don't exactly know how they did that, but they did. And it sort of reinforced in my view that HonorLock works pretty well. Again, there are always some ways that students are going to find around it, but it is definitely better than nothing. So starting back at the top, if you look at this question that I wrote here in an example question, if an atom has 2 electrons, 3 protons, and 3 neutrons, what is its mass number? If you Google this question and add the word Quizlet at the end, it will pop up an answer in 3 seconds, easy. And it's really easy for students to cheat on questions like this. So Meena, if you can go to the next slide I have. I'll come back to that question in just a few more slides, but I think Whitney is going to take it on this one.
Okay, so I want to talk about some of those cheating websites that Dianne just mentioned. And before I do that, I actually want to add a little bit more about our proctoring service, HonorLock, that we're using. So I had an interesting experience with HonorLock. I've been using it since COVID, and I would originally get reports sent to me every so often from HonorLock, and they would say, hey, just so you know, this student had an excessive number of violations, so you might want to review their report. And I thought, oh, that's so handy. I'm so glad that they're sending me this so I can make sure that I'm checking it out. And then I noticed that as time went on, I stopped receiving those. And so I thought, oh, well, I guess my students aren't cheating. This is great. But then last semester, I went in and I checked them manually. And I had one student who had 47 red violations on a 47 question test and had scored like a 98% in the 98th percentile. And I was like, okay, what's going on? Like, why didn't I get a report about this? I watched her video, and sure enough, she just sat there and looked up every single answer. She didn't even try to hide her second device. Like, it was just blatant. So I actually contacted the HonorLock rep and I asked them about it. And they explained to me that for the service, the level of service that we subscribe to at Collin, we should really think of HonorLock as more of a deterrent as opposed to like a live human proctor designed to catch students in the act. And so that really helped to reframe it a little bit for me and made me realize, like, this isn't the end all be all, right? Because cheater's going to cheat, but it is a system that's designed to help prevent them from cheating, right? To deter them. And it's also up to me to follow up and make sure that I'm looking at those reports, that I'm paying attention when there's high violations, and that I'm not just waiting for an email to get sent to me, because at this point I might be waiting a very long time. And so I thought that that was useful to know when you're using HonorLock on your own, that's kind of the level of service that we're getting from them at this point. And we still need to be active or proactive in the deterrent. Mm-hmm. So that's what I wanted to say about HonorLock. Oh, let's go back one more. Sorry, Meena, I wasn't quite ready. As for the cheating websites, so I wanted to just share a little bit of my unique experience that I had with one of them. And if you were in our meeting in January, I told a story about this strange experience that I had with Course Hero. And I'm gonna, for the interest of time, save you from that story this round. But if you see me in the future and you wanna know, I'll be happy to indulge you. But the long story short was that I came into contact with a bunch of reps and higher ups at Course Hero. And when I realized, what the function of the company was, I wasn't really too excited about being in this meeting with them. I didn't realize who they were at first because I met them at an academic conference. And so they quickly had a speech prepared, and they were like, look, we're here at this conference because we want to work with you, not against you, right? We don't want you to see us as the enemy. We want faculty on our side. So here's what we can tell you to help you out, to make sure that we're working together. And so they told me that it's really important that I know what's out there on these type of cheating websites. So for those of you who don't know, Course Hero is a cheating website where students share documents with each other. And if they share a certain number, then they are able to see other things for free. So for example, if they're in my class, or they just passed my class last semester, and so if they take 2 papers that they wrote for my class and they upload it to Course Hero, then they can search for some of Dianne's documents or assignments that are already existing in the Course Hero database that other students have shared. Does that make sense? They can also, yeah, I know. They can also pay for them, but students are going to go about the free route, right? So that's how they share them. And so that was kind of my reaction, oh, wow, when I realized what Course Hero was. And they said, but if there's ever anything out there that you don't want, then just let us know and we will remove it, right? And I was like, okay, well, how do I do that? And so I went back to my hotel from this conference immediately that night and got on my laptop and was like on Course Hero, doing an internet search to see which of my documents were on the Course Hero website, what my students had access to, and how I could remove them. And so if you go to coursehero.com, you put in your name, or you can put in the course that you teach, or Calling College, right? It's kind of like when we're searching for resources on a database, you just play with the search engine a little bit and see what's out there. And using a combination of all three of those, I have found multiple documents that I had no idea existed. And so you can do this, right? I always suggest just doing this, like Googling yourself once a year to see what's out there anyways, but you can do this on all these specific cheating websites. And Course Hero is the one that I tend to generate the most hits from, that I see that students are using. And so, Meena, if you'll go to the next slide, what the Course Hero reps told me was, if you ever see anything that you don't like, all you have to do is shoot us an email at this email that's listed here, dmca@coursehero.com. And they said, and then just copy and paste this message into the body of the email, and then include the links that you think shouldn't be there, that you don't want public for all students to see. Well, at that specific time, I had 3 documents that shouldn't have been there that I didn't want my students cheating off of. And so I included all 3 of them. They were very responsive and they removed it right away. And I double checked to make sure they were gone. And then since learning about this, I have made it just part of my regular new semester practice to do kind of a check to see what's been posted since the last semester. Well, if I'm being honest, I probably really do a good check once a year as part of my August setup, just to see what's there. And I will say, like, I do still have a couple documents there. I have a student posted my public speaking syllabus from, like 2011. I'm not too concerned with that. It doesn't have any kind of information that's sensitive or the students could use to cheat. I don't have a problem with that, but anything that's going to be graded, I immediately have removed. And so this is one step that we can take as faculty to try and deter and prevent students from cheating, making it a little less accessible to them. And I think, Meena, I'll hand it back over to you.
I think I'm next. I just wanted to address the question that came up about when it show up on a Turnitin. If you upload your assignment to Turnitin, it might, but it kind of depends. Like on some of mine, the answers are very likely to be very similar in the first place. Or students can go through and sometimes just use a thesaurus to change synonyms and make it a little bit different. There are ways around Turnitin as well. So I think, we're specifically talking about online cheating here, but I think, students have always tried to find ways to cheat, both in person and online. And so I think just being aware of what they're doing can help you sort of adjust your teaching strategies to try to minimize that. And so looking at ways to minimize it, there's a couple of different strategies that I use that I will go over. And so starting with the question I asked earlier about an atom that has 2 electrons, 3 protons, and 3 neutrons. If you Google that, you will know the answer to that in just a few seconds. And so I could look and ask a similar question in a different way. So if you look at the bottom of my slide, I'm still asking them to give me the same information. I want to know what the mass number, and so they would need to know what is a mass number. It's the number of protons plus the number of neutrons. And then they would have to look at this particular picture, figure out how many protons and neutrons are there. And so if they tried to just Google the question, looking at the picture below, what is the mass number of this atom, they're very unlikely to get the exact question that I've just asked, because it's very generic and they have to attach that question to this picture. It's much harder to look up. So that's one way. You can sort of ask questions in a different way. Now, you do have to be very considerate. Can you go to the next slide for me, Meena? This is another example of a question I would use on an exam. So the question prompt is, the picture above would best be described as A. Again, if you Google that, you're not going to get the answer to this question, because you have to know what the picture itself is describing. And so I find that if I can do that, if I can use generic enough language, it's much harder for students to look them up. The one thing you do have to be very cognizant of, especially in the online sphere, is that all of our pictures have to have alternative text. That's an online accessibility standard. And so when you're writing your alt text, you need to make sure that you write it in a way where students that need to use alt text can visualize the picture, but you don't embed the answer into your alt text. And so in other words, the answer for this particular one is community. And so I would need to be careful in my alt text not to put a coral reef community, for example. That would be a terrible alt text for this particular picture. So keep that in mind. Also, make sure that you understand that almost all publisher created content is pretty easily available online. So we do use some in environmental science. We use Pearson, My Lab, and Mastering Content. And I do go in and change it up pretty frequently, which I find helpful. But still, it is not always difficult for students to go in, especially if it hasn't been updated recently. Sometimes they can find YouTube videos that literally will walk them through a Pearson assignment, for example. Okay, next, I think is still me. So we can also look at creating content that goes beyond just proctored exams, for example. And one of the ones that I do, I put up here, this is taken straight off of my Canvas. This is a description of an assignment that my students do. And this is set up in Canvas as a discussion assignment. So students actually have to research a case study on nitrogen pollution. And you can see the first thing I do is that I have 5 different potential case studies that they need to research, and they are assigned to them depending on their last name. So for example, a student can't just necessarily copy their friends, because their friends is likely to be different from theirs. So that sort of mixes it up a little. But then they actually have to go in and create a video presentation, and I have them use Canvas Studio. They don't have to use Canvas Studio, because in Canvas Studio, you can create videos on YouTube, for example, and upload it to Canvas. And I made a little how to use Canvas Studio video for them to sort of walk them through how to use it. But basically, they need to do a presentation. You can see I included a rubric there. And then they embed it into their discussion post. That's how they upload it. In a Canvas discussion, if you look at the box where you type in your answer, there is a little icon for Studio, and you can import a Studio video that you've made. And so they would put it in as a discussion, and then they have to respond to other people's discussions as well. So again, you can cheat on it, but it's a little bit harder. You know, they have to put their name on the presentation. Which presentation they get is randomized based on last name. It's just a harder assignment to cheat on than, say, like my quizzes, which are basically open book quizzes at this point, and they can do very quickly. Okay.
Okay, I guess that's me. So other ways we can prevent cheating is using different formats for exam. For example, I'm using podcast-based exams. So students are given a podcast to listen to, usually Planet Money podcast. And then exam questions are based on the podcast. So once a student listens to the podcast, then they have to tell me what is the concept that the podcast relates to. And then they elaborate on that concept, and then there are some follow-up questions. They can support their answers to those questions using journal articles, news articles, or any form of data. And I have noticed that students enjoy such assignments as well. When they listen to a podcast, and then they can see the application of the concepts in their real life. They really like it. And another one which I find my students really like is TV show based exams. So students are given a small TV show clip to watch, and then exam questions are based on the clip. I usually take the TV clips, show clips from the Shark Tank episodes. So they watch a 3 or 4 minute clip on Shark Tank, and then based on the clip, they answer questions. For example, one of my exam questions are based on elasticity, where they watch the clip and then they decide, there are sales numbers given in the video. They calculate the elasticity, and after they are done calculations, they decide whether the sharks were right in their guidance or not. And towards the end of our presentation, I may visit this again. Another way which I have found that students cannot cheat is think local. So one of my exam questions is pick a local DFW organization that the student really knows well. It may be student's workplace, it may be a chain restaurant or some local business. And then once students choose that, they talk about where that business is located. And then they talk about how the decisions are made, business decisions are made in that particular organization. If the decisions are made at local level or at the corporate level, and then they talk about relating it to the economic concepts. So for example, if it's a chain restaurant and decisions are being made at the corporate level, how things can improve, what suggestions they can make to the managers to make things improve in that organization. Another couple of things which I have used in my classes are simulations. Students really love playing simulation-based games. And in economics and Harvard Business Review, they have several simulations by topic. I usually take those simulations. And Marginal Revolution University, it's a website for business courses and economics courses. And sometimes I take the simulations or games from their website as well. Another approach is case study analysis or role play or mock interviews, and convince me if I should fund you or not. That's more like Shark Tank kind of environment where student has to present a case, funding case, and they have to convince whether their business should get the funding and why should their business get the funding. And in role play or mock interviews, I have not personally used them, but I have seen my colleagues using them. Most of the people in government or history, I have seen them using the role play and mock interviews, and it makes the history classes pretty interesting. So next idea is shifting the gear. So let students create the assessment rather than us creating it. And a couple of examples on student created assessment are reflective writing, where students choose the topic which influenced them the most and during the semester, and they write about it in detail. Second is a peer review assignment. My colleague Betsy Brody, she uses the peer review assignment a lot, where you create the assignment in a way in Canvas that you assign points for the peer review. And last week she had a presentation on peer review assignments. And next one is digital portfolios. They are becoming very common these days, where a group of faculty members together, they work on an assignment, and where student creates their own digital portfolio, and that portfolio is shared among the faculty members who grade the student work. Next is selfie or video recording based discussions. My colleague in economics, Casey Washington, uses this where students talk about substitutes and complementary goods, and they are holding two substitute commodities in their hands and take a selfie and upload that in the discussion. And students, if they are not comfortable showing their face, they can just hide their face and hold the two products. So these are a couple of ways where student created or peer graded work can help us lift the burden of cheating. Next is making friends with OER Commons. And OER Commons, as we all know by now, it has resources for each and every subject. So once you are in the OER Commons area, you have interactive activities, case studies, lesson plans, assessments. So let's make oercommons.org our friend, right? So these are a couple of resources we have for video clips and economics. I use Economics Media Library, and I'm pretty sure in other subject areas, we also have media libraries available free of cost. So I usually Google. I did not even know this media library exists. So I just Googled creating media-based assessment in economics, and there were several resources which showed up, and Economics Media Library was one of them. And there are some examples on using digital portfolios in the next link. And I assume these slides will be shared, and I'll make sure that you have access to these resources. And then I just talked about OER Commons. OER Commons website has so many resources, so many assessments. And what I do usually is take the assessment ideas from OER Commons and then change it a little bit, because there is a possibility that OER Commons assignments, like all of our other assignments, are available to students on the websites like Course Hero. So I usually change it a little bit. And that's all now. Let's get to the questions. Do we have
I
any
have a comment.
questions? Yes.
I have a comment to offer. I had a student who repetitively had difficulties, he claimed, with setting up HonorLock on his computer. And I called HonorLock to find out what the conversation was and how it went. Found out that HonorLock could send me a transcript of their conversation with the student as they tried to help him work through the problems of setting up his computer, and was convinced that things that they asked him to do were things that he was not doing because of the short amount of time that he used to respond. Like, for instance, they asked him to reboot his computer, and within 5 seconds, he came back and said that he had done that. So I think it was interesting to discover that HonorLock could provide that a transcript of the conversation with the student when the student called for help. Just to know.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's very important information. And I myself was not aware that they do offer that. And that's great. Fantastic.
Yeah, I had a student who repeatedly told me he could not get HonorLock to work on his computer either. And so the thing is, students can go to any of our testing centers and take an exam on HonorLock, or a lot of the library computers also have the webcam microphone capability to take an exam on HonorLock. And so I think, just making that clear that I'm not going to take honor lock off for you because you have technical difficulties. Usually the first exam Sunday night, I get a couple of technical difficulties, but usually by the end of that, everybody's worked it out.
And even a practice test can assure, that they work on the practice test before getting into the exam. And that
Yeah.
way we can ensure that their technical difficulties are taken care of.
Yeah, that's true. You can do an honor lock practice test. I had another story if nobody has any other comments. There's another site called Chegg, CHEGG, that a lot of students use, Chegg. And Chegg, you can actually submit questions to them, and usually within a few minutes you get an answer back. So it's kind of like crowdsourcing your questions. And that's used, a lot of students use that for math and science, especially to solve word problems. But there was a report in the news earlier on in the semester. This happened out of the University of Texas of Austin, where the people that answer your Chegg questions can be anybody. And they were actually going back and blackmailing some of the students that had signed up for Chegg and saying, hey, I know you cheated on your exam because I answered this question for you, to try to extort money from them because they knew they had cheated in a class. And so it's not just a concern with us, but also with our students. It that can really open them up to some liability that they had not considered.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a question, will Course Hero written assignments show up in Turnet and reports? To the best of my knowledge, they do. But correct me, any one of you, if you have a different experience.
Ryan, did you have a question?
Yeah. Lots of great ideas all over the place here. Thanks for all of this. I had a question about the Course Hero thing. Do you have to join like as a faculty member in order to go in and see everything that's there, like with, under your name and stuff like that?
Yes, you have to join them, and you can create an educator account, and then you can see what is in there.
Yeah,
Okay.
most of them will let you create a free educator account.
Got it. And then Whitney mentioned you could email them and have them remove stuff. How often might you have to do that? I mean, I think obviously the best thing is to make your assignments, like you were talking about, personalized, and so harder to cheat. But clearly a lot of that stuff makes it on there. But is it one of those things where you have them take it off and then the next week they got the things back up there? Or
I guess they cannot get the same assignment back up there once we send them an email to remove the assignment. Okay. And usually I do it once a year, but yes, assignments may show up during the semesters. As we are giving the exam, the same time the exam shows up on Course Hero. So we should be doing that more often. But given all our responsibility, it's hard.
I was thinking. Yeah. And I hadn't, this just occurred to me, so I haven't thought through kind of the ethical or whatever. Is it, the thought occurred to me, could you penalize students for uploading things to, uploading your assignments and
I think that's harder because a lot of them use like an online name. They don't always use their own name. I did once on Quizlet see a former student who had uploaded some of my quiz answers, but it had already been a couple of semesters, and so I don't know that that I really have any recourse to go back and say, hey, you made this grade a couple of semesters ago, but I don't know that that's something we can really enforce.
Yeah.
Okay. A comment back on that. If students uploaded that material to a public website, they're sharing that information, and sharing that information is a violation of the student code. It ought to be brought to the attention of the Dean of Students.
Thank you all for your answers.
I've got
Yeah.
I've got a little history of an experiment that I did one time in one of my classes. And I did this in 2 sections, and I had everybody in the section. I was using Scantrons at the time, and I made out a key for a theoretical exam of 100 questions. And I asked everybody to, and I handed Scantrons out to everybody and asked them to fill out the questions. There were no questions. I just asked them to fill out the boxes. And so I ran all of those Scantrons that students had done randomly through my random, through the Scantron test using my randomized key. And I thought it was interesting that the average score was 27%. So I think that's kind of a low level for the sort of results that it kind of shows a low level threshold for what we would want to see for people who had studied. That was a thought that I had. I thought it was an interesting little problem, but I wanted to share that with you and let you hear what I had to say about it.
Well, another thing I do sometimes, especially with my quizzes, which again I don't proctor because we can only have so many proctored assessments. So my weekly quizzes, usually about once a semester, once every other semester, I'll go in and change the wording of the questions or change the correct answer. And I noticed that a couple of my students will have sort of lower quiz, because they start out trying to cheat on them and then they get it wrong. And it kind of seems to discourage them from trying it again after, if they get burned the first 2 or 3 weeks, they're a little less likely to keep trying that. But again, it's something you're always going to have to be on top of in order to do that.
That is true. I have an interesting story in my exam. I was using last semester's exam, but I changed the numbers. And it was interesting that 3 of my students used the same numbers as the previous semester to solve the exam. And I asked them, where did they get the number from? Because this is not what the current exam is. So apparently they had cheated. They had taken the exam answers from previous semester, and students do that. And I have submitted the Turnitin request from the instructor because I ran it through the Turnitin and the similarity did show up. And I have submitted the request from the professor. We cannot see the name of the professor, but we can submit a request to send us their student artifacts with which we have the similarity. And I do see some interesting comments in the chat. So Claire says she asked a student about uploading questions to Quizlet, and the student said they don't see it as cheating. They consider it helping other students succeed in the course. Yeah, yes, that's what they think. That's what their perspective is, unfortunately. And the similar story I have where 2 students posted the same discussion post, even the examples were same. And I talked to them and they said, well, we are collaborating. We are trying to learn from each other. And I'm like, collaborating and learning is encouraged, but not on the graded work. Yeah. And Sarah shares a news article about California college professor sues the student midterm final exams. Yeah, that looks like an interesting link.
Yeah, when it was coming up in discussion, I thought, I'm pretty sure I've heard about this recently. So just Googled that, and that was from last month. I'm very interested in what Claire posted, and Allison asked, do you ever have conversations with your students about what constitutes cheating in your course and why? That's a really good, I think, conversation to have. And, you know, reading Claire's comment, I can kind of see where students would get there. But if they handed the information to one other student, of course they would say that was cheating. So it's interesting, just the change in the medium and the way that they're sharing information, that they would assume that posting it maybe anonymously or sharing it with wide groups of students online, that's like they're helping and they wouldn't view that as cheating. So I think that's a very interesting topic. And I am curious if anyone brings this up as an example in your classes as something that is cheating.
I have, and at the beginning of the course, and both face-to-face and online, I go through all the definitions of cheating. I even have it on their honor code that says that they understand what it is, what this means, how it's cheating. And they still, like, they either don't care, or there's just still a disconnect, that they don't understand how posting that information is a violation of the code.
Yeah, I agree. And I think some things they may not necessarily understand constitute cheating, like self-plagiarism, for example, where they turn in a paper to multiple classes. I know that was something that when I was at Texas A&M, we had a person that would come in and talk about it, and that was one of the things. But also just not properly citing your sources, you know, that is also included in plagiarism, which is a form of cheating. And so I think we could definitely do better in sort of laying out what constitutes cheating, but it's also hard because especially early in the semesters, we throw so much at them, you know, here, read the syllabus, and this is how Studio works, and this is how this works, and this is how Interlock works. And I think it's really easy for them to get overwhelmed. So maybe like a little module on what constitutes cheating as part of the new student orientation would be beneficial, as opposed to them having to hear it from every professor in every class. I mean, I think it's good to go back in and reinforce those ideas, but you know, if they could sort of have some of that information from the get-go, I think that's also pretty helpful, because they get away with a heck of a lot of cheating in high school. So they don't really think about it by the time they get here.
I guess if we create small video clips and show it to those video clips and ask them, do you consider this cheating? And once they answer it, then we elaborate on, you know, what is the correct answer. So it would be like role play, two students sharing notes, and we are creating a video clip on that. And as Dianne said, that if we include those video clips and quiz in the student orientation, that would help a lot.
I have a question about the syllabus that we use. We're using the Concourse syllabus. And we know that the Dean of Students policies are that a teacher is not allowed to assess a penalty on a student unless the Dean of Students finds that student is culpable for cheating. So the question I've got is, and I can't remember this offhand or not, I don't think it's true that Concourse syllabus has any required section in which the instructor states what the penalties could be for cheating. And I'm thinking that maybe that's something that we can do to improve our communication with our classes and with our students. Any comment?
Yeah, usually we do include the Collin College policy for plagiarism and cheating in the syllabus. And usually we are recommended to include what the penalty would be if students, do not follow the policy. And that's a great idea to have the penalty upfront written in the syllabus. Right.
One of the things that I've observed from students who come in from high school with somewhat of a track record of laxity and easy cheating is they don't get penalized. They just lose the points. So in my syllabus, what I try to do is explain that if I report them to the dean of students and they're found guilty, that their grade will take a negative hit for the number of points they could have had. So it's not a zero. It's actually even worse than a zero. It's a negative number of points that applies to them. And I also plainly state that a second effort would cause me to issue an F for the class, because the dean of students allows me to assign that grade if I put that in my syllabus. So I try to be very upfront with my students to tell them what the consequences will be if they cheat and they're discovered cheating and they're proven to be cheating.
Yeah, great points.
Yeah, I actually, I explicitly tell them, that the penalty for plagiarism in particular will be a grade of 0 and a disciplinary incident report. And I've found one thing that's been really helpful in cutting down plagiarism is when it happens the first time, because I have 5 written assignments over the course of the semester. When it happens the first time, I tell them, I'll hold off on the disciplinary incident report if you write me a 1-page essay in your own words explaining why the submission is an example of plagiarism and what you will do in the future to avoid it. And it usually scares them enough that they don't plagiarize again. And then I don't have to go through all the hassle of actually doing the disciplinary incident report stuff. It's been really effective.
Great idea, Ryan. In the chat, Allison has shared some additional resources on academic integrity on the CTL website.
I jumped off the chat for just a minute and I see a bunch of stuff about the new student orientation in there. So yes, that's absolutely on our radar and these are great ideas. Let me see, I'm reading Mindy's chat, scenario-based application. Yes, I think that's a great idea. Having information that I think is really, could be very specific for online students. And, these are examples of what cheating looks like in an online classroom. It's just different than face-to-face. And so maybe, maybe our students aren't getting it the first time, but us providing just as many resources as possible to help them understand what is and what isn't appropriate is a great idea. So I appreciate those comments in the chat.
Any other comments, suggestions, questions? Thank you, everyone. You all had great ideas. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate that.
Yes, thank you. I think this is a moving target. So the
Yeah.
more we can sort of let each other know what is out there, the better prepared we all are.
Absolutely.
Really good ideas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely evolving area. Thank you so much, Dianne, Meena, and Whitney, and to everybody else as well. It is just so helpful to hear what different people are seeing and what they're doing in their classroom. So this was a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you everyone for this great presentation, and thanks to all who joined us here today.
Thanks, Allison, for facilitating.
Yeah, of course.
It's a really good presentation. Thank you so much.